Throughout the world, people of faith are the first responders to the suffering of their neighbors, faithfully advocating alongside people who bear the ills of our times. It begins at the grassroots level, in the village, city, or small town. A community rises to unite faith with deed, and the world changes. And we bear witness to a force of light that renews our hope. Almost half the world lives on less than $2.50 a day. The majority of the world's people and nations live in a state of poverty. Poverty is a pronounced deprivation in well-being, and it contains many dimensions. It includes low incomes and the inability to acquire the basic goods and services necessary for survival with dignity. Poverty also encompasses low levels of health and education, poor access to clean water and sanitation, inadequate physical security, and insufficient capacity and opportunity to better one's life. It is within these settings that we witness the work of communities and individuals. They reject oppression and empower their neighbors to discover lives outside of poverty. Detroit, Michigan. It's a city built by immigrants. It's the heart of the American automobile industry and the home of Motown music. There was a time when it was America's fourth largest city, an epicenter for global trade and commerce, labor unions, and the blue-collar middle class. Today, the city is in crisis after years of devastating economic decline. Since 2000, 48% of the manufacturing jobs in Michigan were lost to other countries. The unemployment rate is more than 18%. About 60% of Detroit's children live in poverty. It competes for the highest murder rate in the nation and has one of the highest rates of unhoused for individuals and families.
This city has gone through a Category 5 storm, and it's been brewing for years.
Ordinary citizens are now battling for the survival of their community and the well-being of their neighbors.
We're cut from the same cloth. We'll rebuild. No one tells us we can't rebuild. No one.
On this day, the community is celebrating the groundbreaking for the renovation of a 34,500 square foot building.
Just call on me, brother, if you need a hand. We all need somebody to lean on. I just might have a problem that you'll understand. We all need somebody to lean on. Lean on me.
As part of the Cass Community Social Services, the building will be upgraded to 41 apartments, providing housing for unhoused adults with special needs. It's a $10 million development that has required multiple partners and collaborative relationships.
Want to help out? This is how you do it.
Reverend Fowler is the visionary behind the development. She's the executive director for Cass Community Social Services and pastor for Cass Community United Methodist Church.
Thousands. What seemed impossible all of a sudden was doable, achievable, accomplishable. It was amazing what happened on that beach.
But this is just the latest development in a 6-building campus. The CCSS campus provides housing programs, education and vocational training, food and health services.
Much of what Cass started doing and continues doing would be considered charity. It's feeding you, it's clothing you, it's sheltering you, it's giving you clothing, and that's good, and we don't have any intention of stopping it. But we're also now working very diligently at larger solutions to the things that lead to hunger and homelessness and domestic violence and people living with AIDS, so that we're into permanent housing and not just an emergency shelter.
There are 2 transitional housing programs that are provided specifically for women.
Mom's Place 1 is for women with dependents. Mom's Place 2 is for women without dependents, whether they have no children, if their children might be grown, or their children could be in the foster care system and they're working towards getting them back. So oftentimes I've had women come over to Mom's Place 2, work towards getting their family back, show that they have stable housing because of the transitional housing facility, get their children back, and then transition over to Mom's Place 1, where then they work with their families towards permanent housing.
Once in the CCSS system, a holistic approach with a continuum of care is provided.
From day 1, they come in and we set person-centered planning, which is goals that they identify that they want to work on over the 2 years that they're here. Some of it oftentimes might be housing, obtaining their own house, their own apartment, or finding an income, or getting their GED, or going to college. We have a lot of women here who are in college and then are looking for employment so that they can get the income to sustain their housing. And I feel that the person-centered plan is such a big component, setting down the groundwork, staying focused on what they want to work on, and having the support of us and my staff to work on that. And then that gets them exactly where they want to be.
Linda MacNeil is a businesswoman and cosmetologist. She owns her own hair salon and lending company for other salons. She employs several people and has served as a member of the CCSS board for several years. She was also living on the street for 10 years and addicted to heroin.
Sometimes I don't think it's real. It's still like a dream some days. It was a long process of homelessness, without shelter, without food, not knowing where you're going to take a shower or clean up, businesses not allowing you to come in. You can't apply for a job because you don't have an address, you don't have a phone, you don't have clean clothes.
Linda used the services provided by the Cass Community United Methodist Church. It was here where she could find a hot meal and warm clothes.
I always saw a glimmer in the people that volunteered and helped me in that church. And I used to say to myself, one of these days, if I ever get my life together, I'm going to come back here and go to church. And that's exactly what happened.
Linda's recovery and transformation began with a prayer.
Eventually, I just had enough. And I went and sat on the corner of 3rd and Willis. And it was winter time during the holidays, and I was sitting there with a wino. And he asked me if I wanted to drink some Sterno. I was so sick, I needed heroin, I needed drugs. I didn't want wine or Sterno, but I did consider drinking. And I just said, Ralph, I know everybody calls you God, but I'm not worthy, so, okay, Ralph, if you ever aren't busy taking care of everybody else and you have just a little second one day, maybe, you can just get this monkey off my back. I don't need a house with a white picket fence. I don't need anything. I just need this monkey off my back. So I know you're a really busy guy up there, but if you ever have a chance to kind of talk to a beggar like me, I'd appreciate it. And I don't know what signs to look for, but I'm here in case you can ever help me.
Linda kicked her addiction, reconnected with her family, sought medical treatment, and finished school.
After I had some time of sobriety under my belt and I felt comfortable, I stopped. I loaded my van up and I came down with a load of clothes because I wanted to give back and maybe give somebody else that little faith of that mustard seed. Went into the church, and actually Reverend Fowler was preaching. And I looked around and just the smell of the church, the environment of the church, I sat down, listened to her, and just bawled my eyes out. I felt like I was home, but without the addiction. The miracle happened to me.
The miracle is happening to many other people thanks to the efforts of Reverend Fowler and Cass Community Social Services. One of its most innovative programs is Green Industries.
We do many green projects which trains and employs the members of the community, members who participate in our other programs.
Green Industries jobs reclaim discarded materials and eliminate blight while providing work. Mud Mat Production is a program that trains and employs men to pick up illegally dumped tires and converts the rubber into mud mats. More than 20,000 tires from the streets of Detroit have been picked up and repurposed. Another self-sustaining business is document destruction.
We have our shredding industry, which we employ individuals from the day program, the activity center. We employ them and they shred documents. We have partnerships with lawyers and other businesses that require their documents to be shredded. And then we bring them in, we shred them, and then we take them out to be recycled.
50 people are employed in the program, and they can shred 1 ton of paper every hour. Micro Enterprises is a program that helps people with developmental disabilities start their own businesses.
The notion of Cass as a campus is really a simple thing. It's not rocket science. It's when you look at who's providing what. One organization is providing great housing, it's over here. One organization is providing great job training, it's over here. Somebody else is providing food, it's over here. And none of the homeless have cars. So they have to take the bus. In the last 2 years, while Detroit has struggled financially, bus routes have been eliminated, bus days have been eliminated. So it occurred to me, since the area that Scott is in had all that vacant property and potential buildings, that we could build a campus. Within a mile from Scott, we have 400 vacant lots and 300 abandoned buildings, within a mile. So you have to see that as potential or opportunity and not just as a bad thing. So we started putting these buildings together. So now, okay, let's say I move into Brady. I can walk to the warehouse, it's 2 blocks. I can work there. I can walk to the warehouse, it's 2 blocks. I can worship there. I can walk to Scott, it's 3 blocks. I can take classes there. If it's the end of the month and I've run out of money and run out of food, I can walk to Scott and have meals there. I can come and participate in social programming there. I can walk to Scott. We have a very small store. If I need, bread or milk or deodorant there. So now my quality of life is improved significantly.
Sometimes talked about, but I'm going home.
The quality of life for Minnie is improved significantly due to the efforts of Faith and her team. She attributes their motivation to the Bible.
It doesn't matter where you go in the Bible, there's going to be instruction to look out for the least and the last and the lost, and to do it in such a way that you see Jesus Christ himself in that person, that you're not creating a situation of dependency or that robs somebody of their dignity, but out of the joy of knowing the grace of God.
Knowing where to start and what to develop to support the needs of people is the first hurdle.
Because far too often we set up another soup kitchen that isn't needed, but something else is needed. So if we know what's truly needed, if we do a needs assessment, asking the people and not asking the people who want to provide whatever they want to provide, they'll tell you. Just walking from the groundbreaking yesterday, somebody came up to me and said, well, when are you going to have housing for families? Because everybody's blah, blah, blah. I said, that'll be next. Thank you for telling me. So finding out what people really need and then working to provide it. Trying very desperately not to replicate or duplicate what's already out there. Because if somebody else is doing it, let them do it. Help them do it. right? Fill in the gap. That's what we do with people with AIDS. That's what we did with the mentally ill who are homeless. That's what we try and do. There's so much to do. Do what's not being done that's needed.
The Cass Church has a long tradition of mission. The first soup kitchen was established during the Great Depression to feed the hungry. The soup kitchen has never stopped. Cass currently serves over 1 million meals annually. In the 1970s and 80s, Cass responded to the large numbers of unhoused people who required daytime services, as well as those who could not access shelter at night.
Probably my first vivid recollection was the pastor in my growing up years was Lou Redmond. He served here for 28 years before he graduated seminary until the day he retired. And his son, Robert, was in the community settling a dispute when he was shot to death, 20-some years old. And I can remember my parents at the dining room table talking about what it costs to be a minister or to be in ministry. And I've never forgotten that conversation, although they weren't talking to me, because they phrased it in such a way that they had great honor and respect for this man and his family who are obviously grieving, and that's the way it is sometimes to do God's work. So they weren't saying don't do it, just count the costs.
In the 18 years since Faith Fowler has been at Cass, the programs have grown exponentially. In 2002, Cass Community Social Services was established as a separate nonprofit to accommodate the church's expansion goals. Since then, the Cass campus has emerged. The main challenge to building programs, according to Faith, is not money.
You know, most days people in my position would tell you it's money. It's not. The greatest challenge is getting people to believe what's possible so that they'll throw their whole selves into it. If you really believed you could change education, you could change transportation, if you could change the justice system and how we incarcerate people here, if you really believed we could change, housing so there's affordable housing for, you'd do it. So that's the greatest challenge, I think. Getting people to commit, and if they believe it, I think they'll do it.
Perhaps Reverend Fowler's greatest asset is that she sincerely cares for those around her.
Rev's kind of a person that doesn't like her horn to be tooted. She doesn't like to be in the limelight. She doesn't like to be praised for all her hard work. But her visions and the motivation, she is such a real person. She's the type of person that anybody can go to and talk to. I don't care if you're homeless or, if you've got multiple doctorates degree. She has time for everyone.
One of the most geographically diverse states in America, Oklahoma slopes from the high plains in the west to the low wetlands in the southeast. Western ranchers, Native American tribes, Southern settlers, and Eastern oil barons have shaped the state's image. And it is one of the most politically conservative states in the country. Oklahoma is faced with its fair share of struggles. Its poverty rate is higher than the national average. And it sends more women to prison on a per capita basis than any other state in the country. In fact, this is more than twice the national rate. Drug offenses account for 45% of women in prison, with possession being the highest offense.
We have 26,000 people in prison, and there's an estimated over 20,000 of these folks have drug addiction problems, and their crimes are a result of drug addiction. They do not represent a threat to society, but what they do represent is a group of folks that are going to continue to go in and out of prison unless they get some treatment.
Fields established the Advocacy Council as a collaborative grassroots movement to change harsh sentencing laws in Oklahoma.
My story begins with addiction. And as a result of that addiction, I wrote some checks, I wrote quite a few checks actually, and was sent to prison. In prison, I discovered, or to my horror, I learned that there are many, many women in there just like me that had been thrown away. They had been regarded as useless, worthless individuals, not fit to be mothers, not fit to be sisters or family members. You know, society had thrown us away.
After her release, Gwen was determined to change her life. She got a degree in petroleum engineering and worked for Chevron. Her advocacy began when she got a job as an assistant to State Senator Connie Johnson.
The whole challenge has always been advocacy. How do you get the word out? How do you get people educated, aware, and acting?
Since then, she has pulled together a number of influential community leaders and organizations to raise awareness about harsh sentencing laws.
Our laws are exacerbating the problem right now to the extent that we are locking people up for behavioral health issues. Addiction is very much a behavioral health issue. And the research has shown it's cheaper to treat addiction than it is to incarcerate for addiction. Relapse is a part of addiction. But even if a person relapses, the cost of treatment 3 times still doesn't add up to the cost of incarceration for 1 year. So our legislature, to the extent that we don't acknowledge the illness or the disease states of addiction, and instead we criminalize them.
The nation has seen a rise of for-profit prison companies. This private prison system is cited as one of the reasons why people are incarcerated more often and for longer periods. Mass incarceration provides significant profit for the private prison industry. Their business model depends on locking up more and more people and keeping their prisons full. When people go to prison, there are often children who are left behind.
It's worse when you incarcerate a mom in some ways because the mother is often a single parent and she's the only adult in the household. So then the children get ripped out of the household. They bounce around relatives and friends quite frequently. It creates shame and ridicule of those children. And then they grow up and they don't know what to do with those feelings because we're not doing anything to intervene. And if we don't intervene, then they're going to grow up and they're going to do exactly the same thing because they're going to find that using drugs or committing crimes helps them release their angry feelings and starts the cycle all over again. So if each prisoner has only 2 children, then you double the prison population in a generation.
We cannot incarcerate ourselves out of the problem of addiction. People are hurting. People are wounded. Environmental issues and political issues and family issues are constant in people's lives. And they're doing all they can to survive. And in many cases, they're self-medicating. And in Oklahoma, that gets criminalized, and it has been criminalized since the early 90s as a part of the war on drugs. And so here we are, 20 years later, with prison populations bursting at the seams, and we're still trying to utilize incarceration as the solution.
Criminal Justice and Mercy Ministries, a ministry of the Oklahoma Conference of the United Methodist Church, provides direct, hands-on services to people who are impacted by incarceration. The Exodus House offers temporary transitional apartment living for people newly released from prison who can live with their families while they re-enter life outside of prison walls. There are outreach and camp programs for children who have an incarcerated parent. Redemption Church is a fellowship of prisoners, ex-prisoners, and families who reach out and help others with similar life experiences. These mercy ministries offer hands-on help for people directly affected by incarceration. And many people are helped. Justice ministry, though, is more difficult to perform.
What we've never been able to do enough of all these years is the ministry of justice.
Reverend Bassler's mission is to educate students, lawmakers, and faith communities about restorative justice. It's the ministry that emphasizes systemic change in society.
Again, the focus will be on restorative justice, which is a biblical alternative to a retributive system of justice. I'm very much informed by Howard Zehr, the Mennonite writer, who, in explaining restorative justice, says retributive justice asks three questions: what rule was broken, who did it, and what do they deserve? Restorative justice asks what harm was done or who was harmed, who should be held accountable, and how do we make it right? Whereas one is reactive, focuses on a rule, and punishment is the outcome. The other is forward-looking. It's a search for solutions, and the end product is restitution and restoration as opposed to punishment.
Bassler is working to bring high-ranking officials together who are willing to talk about restorative justice.
My hope is to get all of these people together more than once if possible, and try to get them to buy into a vision, which would include continuing ed for perhaps lawyers as well as clergy, and to begin to have some trial plots right here in Oklahoma County where the agreement is made that some kinds of cases can be handled restoratively.
Reverend Bassler, Gwen Fields, and the Senator all supported the passage of a ballot initiative known as State Question 762. The initiative removes the governor from the parole process. It took 10 years, headed up by John Pearson and the group, to get it passed.
We estimated that $40 million a year would be saved by removing her from the process, but from the human aspect, or from our side of the story, we had people who were sitting in jails or sitting in prison for 8 months or a year waiting to get out once the parole board had said they could go home.
Today, Reverend Bassler, the Senator, and Gwen Fields are joining forces in establishing the Oklahoma Justice Initiative.
The Oklahoma Justice Initiative is a coalition of agencies and groups around Oklahoma who are interested in seeing drug policy reform. We want to see sentencing reform long term, but the next few years we'll be working on just reforming the drug code. Previously, our strategy has been, grassroots movement, have calls into legislators, have letters to legislators, and those things simply haven't worked. It's been just very, very regressive here, and people are very resistant. Legislators are resistant. And so we've identified an important group of folks who weigh in with our legislature and who have more influence than anyone, and that is corporations. Corporations in Oklahoma, they're a big presence here, of course, they pay taxes here, and they are the backbone of our society, big oil particularly. And so we are going to get our faith leaders together, create a coalition of faith leaders, inform those folks of the issues, and then have them meet with a series of these corporation heads, the owners, the CEOs, COOs, and persuade them that the things that we talk about and the things that we advocate are the socially, they're the correct things to do. They're the things that we need to do to keep our society thriving. The goal is to get corporate leaders to sign on to an open letter to our legislature to say, we are not happy, we are displeased with your pattern and practice of incarcerating people for things that they should be receiving treatment for, and we think it's a better expenditure of state dollars to do that.
Churches in Oklahoma in particular, and in the civil rights movement throughout the country, have always been at the forefront of change. For some reason, our churches have been lulled into complacency, kind of like the citizens.
The biggest part of the strategy is to get the faith leaders informed, get them educated, get them fired up, get them ready to go. point them towards these corporate leaders, let them sit down together and break bread together and talk about this common problem that we have.
For the West African country of Liberia, the long-term effects of war continue to cripple the nation, especially for the most vulnerable of its population.
Liberia has still today about 80% unemployment is the official UN and World Bank statistic. Very high illiteracy rates, education system that's been underfunded and really suffering for quite some time, and a healthcare system that is still shattered. So an infrastructure in disrepair after 26 years of war. And what we have is an economy that's still now, 10 years after the war, in crisis. So what you see is with 80% unemployment, it is often women and young people that are pushed to the margins, that are rendered invisible. It is those long-term impacts of war that end up stripping away opportunities, particularly for women and young girls. It's opportunities for education. Education beyond a certain level is not free. And even though the costs may seem low from the perspective of someone in the US, it is incredibly difficult for people to meet those costs. And without educational opportunity, the opportunities for employment are even more limited. So you have women that are selling secondhand clothing and other wares in an informal economy to be able to survive. And you do have women who are selling their bodies in order to survive. In spite of the tremendous risks, sexual violence, of HIV/AIDS, it's the only way that they're able to survive themselves and put food on the table to feed their children.
My mother is a poor woman. My father is dead. The only way I can do my living is that I come on the street. The only way, because I don't have nobody to help me.
So how did you know how to start going onto the street?
Somebody come to me and go in the club and dance. Men come to me, so now I'm passing on the street. Car start for me. I get inside. I'm walking around, men call me, but I don't go to men. They always call me.
How much do they pay you?
They ask me, they say, how much money should I give you to have some time with you? So now I charge them 20, 25.
US dollars?
Yes.
Are you in school?
No, I'm not in school.
What class did you stop?
When my father was living, I stopped in the 7th grade.
In the 7th grade?
Yeah.
7th grade? How did they think you earned money?
But I'm lied to them.
You lied to them?
Yeah. While my father was alive, he used to support us, send us to school. I ain't there to tell her on the street because when she hear it, she can feel bad. So when she asked me, I can lie to her. I say, oh, I go help people to sell, or I'm working. Like, only way she will feel fine. But I can't tell her on the street. And for me, I want to go back to school.
What would you like to go back to school to study?
I want to become a doctor.
A doctor?
Yeah. I want to become a doctor. That's what I like from the day I was small. I used to see the doctor name passing. I say, oh, the day when I get big, I will become doctor. But I don't have the hand. My father is dead. I don't feel happy because when my father was alive, and he used to take care of me. He used to do everything for me when I was in the 7th grade. He died. So if I come on the street, some men they treat us bad. I don't feel happy, but I don't have nobody to help me, so I'm forced to go on the street. I love my daughter because my first born, God gave me twins. I born 2 girls.
Oh, 2 guys.
Twins. Yeah, twins.
Twins?
2 girls.
So wow, you have twins. Are they with their mother?
Yeah, they were my mother. I born twins.
What are your daughters like? What do they like to do?
Oh, when they see me, they can feel happy. Anytime they see me, and I like them too. So I feel bad when I come on the street because I'm on the street and God gave me 2 children the same time. So I feel
So what
bad.
is your wish for them?
I can be praying for them to not be like me. Now I always tell my mother, the way I don't have them to go to school, my make sure we send them to school for them to learn.
I think there's a lot that people can do. Write letters, understand the power in writing letters. Also, use opportunities to impact the media. Meet with and send letters to local newspapers. Encourage them to cover international issues, to understand the role of the U.S. in the world and how U.S. leadership can be, through people power, encouraged to be on the right side of history. Do we spend taxpayer dollars on more wars? Is that how congregants want their resources to flow? Or do we instead make demands that taxpayer resources go towards building a better world, a more stable world, a more just world? I think there is tremendous power as consumers to place demands on corporations to be good global players. That corporations do the right thing, to not just extract resources, but to report on contracts, to be open in their accounting and not try to evade taxes into tax havens or to avoid taxes. It is really stripping away resources needed for development. Those domestic resources in countries like Liberia can only happen if corporations allow the proper fees and taxes to be paid on the resources that they're extracting from Africa. The more we stand together, understand that the power is in numbers across borders, that we are one human family. What happens that impacts and brings injustice to one is an injustice to all, and we have to stand together for values of justice and of human dignity in this 21st century, whatever way we can.
Reigning as the matriarch of her 50-member family, Clarice has witnessed the atrocities of civil war and its destruction to the land and people. Today, in the midst of the Reconstruction, Clarice has made it her business to fight for the rights and education of women. As conference president of United Methodist Women, Clarice advocates for women on a more formal basis throughout the country.
I travel from one end of the country to the other, meeting women, trying to empower them, conducting workshops with them in various areas, like teaching them to do proposals on different projects that they want to carry out, train them into empowering themselves, like what projects they have, whether it's soap making or it's sewing or whether it's pastry. We go into all of that.
The church offers opportunities through the Women's Training Center in Monrovia. Each of the 20 districts sends women to be trained in various disciplines.
When they come back, they go back and serve as TOTs, trainers of trainers, to teach other women, empowering them in the disciplines that they have learned. When these women are trained and sent back to the districts, we do follow up onto how well they are coming on, whether they're doing well or not.
Clarice is an advocate for causes that most directly affect women.
So we are out there to advocate for others. We are not working for ourselves. We're working for the glorification of God, yes. But in order to gain the glory of God, we must serve humanity. We must work for our fellow brothers and sisters. Help raise them. Don't just let them sit there. Don't pass by someone on the street without saying hello or lifting them up or giving them something that will make their day a better day, for them to feel that they are humans and others care for them. They don't have to be relative of yours. So these are all things that we try to carry out in our conference.
In the DRC, the heart of Africa, there is another woman helping others out of the cycle of poverty. She is known as Odette and is the president of the Camina de France, an organization that facilitates micro-enterprises.
Mie niko nafundisha ba mama kuya kona courage ya kuya kuanza kutumika kazi sa vile ba papa beko natumika. Ba mama barikuwa naishi mu ignorance bakwanze kuyua koma il faut place ya mwanamuke mu societe.
Odette is teaching the women how to be self-sufficient.
Na tunafanya makotization yetu, tunapata makuta, hapa tunesha kuinstale, tunakuwa na magazin yetu kule kusite. Sasa kufuatana na posibilite ile tuko nayo iko kiloko, njo tunapenda ko microcredit, njo ya kufa magazin ya munene kuiweka sasa muvili, tuhamishe musite tuweke muvili kintu kinene kile bantu beko naona.
People find success through the support of the organization's facilitators.
Ndiyo tuko na muntu moya, ule muntu alianza mbele eko nojisha tu makala. Hapa anesha kutoka mu makala, anaanza kujisha masukari, manchumvi, masavon, kufuatana na conseil ile tulipata mu les amis de Camina.
Even the vice president of the board of leaders has benefited from the facilitator's advice. Baba Attar produces maize and rice with his grinding machine.
Rafiki wa Camina walinikuta na ile kazi. Mashauri makubwa yenyewe ilinipatia nguvu kazi ni wakati president wetu aliendaka Marekani kwenda kufuata formation. Sasa alikuya anakia kutuelezea namna ya matumizi ya kutumia na namna ya kutumikisha wafanyakazi ili tusikie, kwa lakini ndani yake hakuna msaada. Tunajikaza kufuatana na mashauri ya president.
Most often, it is through these micro-enterprises where people begin to gain liberty from the poverty surrounding them. The students become the teachers, and tangible steps are offered that can create change. Poverty in Appalachia is a complex and deep-rooted issue. According to the Appalachia Service Project, Appalachia's problems stem from the fact that an overwhelming majority of its land and mineral rights are owned by outside corporations.
The reality is, people in Appalachia feel neglected. You know, 20, 30 years ago, Appalachia was in the news pretty negatively, but now the nation has moved on to something else. We have other interests, but the needs are still here.
As a result of undertaxation, local municipalities have had very little revenue to finance adequate educational systems, construct and maintain water and sewage treatment facilities, provide for county landfills, roads, and basic health care.
There's a lot of generational poverty here. Second and third and fourth generation. We see that throughout the community.
One way many families are able to escape poverty in Appalachia is by working in the coal mines. Coal mining has been a way of life for many generations. Underground coal mining is a skilled trade that requires experience, intelligence, and physical stamina. It continues to be the source of sustainable employment for many of the families who live here.
I've grown up in southwestern Virginia. My grandfather, my father, as well as my great-grandfather have all been miners, underground miners.
Like his forefathers, this man is working in the mines to support his family. He has requested that we not reveal his name.
I recall seeing my father come home in miserable shape, just wore out, hurting. His knees would be blistered. And he'd just look at me whenever he was young and tell me, son, just don't ever go in the mines.
He listened to his father, and after he moved out of state, he worked in a variety of jobs that didn't require a college education. When he got married and began to raise a family, he felt the desire to go back home.
I eventually realized that if I wanted to live here, be with my family, be with the generations of my family that's around here, I would have to get a job that had good income, and that left pretty much just the mines.
He has now been working at the mines for 2 years. He is a red hat operator, meaning he is often working in the most dangerous areas of the mine.
There's a few instances I'd be standing in one spot, move away, and 30 seconds later a rock big enough to kill you was there. But you just shake it off, you know, go brag to your friends, hey, I just bought it, just about bought it over here. And that's the mentality that goes on in the mines. I realized that if you focus on your work, then you don't think so much about the dangers that are involved.
Prescription drug abuse is widespread among the miners.
When a miner is injured, and most of the injuries in mines are pretty severe. A lot of them are head injuries, back injuries, require strong medication. Sometimes the medication, even if they're not really addicted, the medication is so strong that they're just not able to function.
Injuries aren't the only health issue coal miners contend with.
As far as on the miners, you always have the issue of dust, inhalation, black lung. I've noticed that my breathing has slowly started to degrade a little bit, even though I've only been in the mines for a couple of years.
His great-grandfather died of black lung, and his grandfather and father suffer with it today. But it is his fellow miners who help him get through the days.
But there are some people that would just go to the ends of the earth to help you. And they also realize that this is all there is. And if they want to live here, if they want to be in the mountains and be around where they were raised and raise their children in the same way and be able to make a living, there's not many choices. They have to go into the mines.
The heavy burden of economic struggle challenges many today. As people of faith, it is our responsibility to help establish a fair and just society. When we create opportunities, build resources, seek justice, and serve others, we are making today a better tomorrow.